When I go on vacation in Las Vegas, I like to keep a gambling budget and keep a log of what I gamble so that I don't spend too much money. And I use an app called iXpenseit, and it's for the iPhone. I don't think there's an Android version. I'm not associated with the app or have anything to do with it. It's just an app that I had found that I use and seems to work well. I'm sure you could do the same thing with another budgeting app that has similar functions and features, but this is the one I use. Even though I use this personally just to track my gambling budget, I don't track other budgets while on vacation. You could modify it to use it for any kind of budgeting for a vacation. If you go and search in the App Store for iXpenseit and type in iXpenseit or part of that to find the app, there's a light version and a full version. I use the full version. I was using the light version, but it does limit you on the number of transactions. And I think that's the only difference. Went to the full version because I use it all the time. So once you download it, the first thing I did was update some settings. Settings that I've changed were I turn off showtime and the sound, turn on cash basis. I also set the default entry to amount so that when I do go to log an entry, the first thing it does is ask me for the amount, which works well for gambling. The rest of the settings I just kept the same. I mean, you can look around and play around with them, but those are the only ones I had modified to use for my purposes. For account, I just create a cash account since all of mine, my budgeting I'm doing has to do with cash. So I just create one cash account. The next thing I set up is vendors. You'll see that there are default vendors that the app gives you. I don't use those because I'm using this for a specific purpose of tracking gambling. So I delete all those. It's a little cumbersome because you have to delete them one by one, but once you delete them, you don't have to do that anymore. If you're going to use the app for more than just gambling, you might want to leave them in or leave some of them in for the businesses that you do frequent. So for vendors, I personally use different casinos. So I put in all the different casinos that I may go to in a trip. I just keep them all in there. I may not go to them all in one particular trip. So I just put all the ones that I may or may not frequent. You could also do this if you don't care about that detail about which casino it was. You could put in and do it by Players Club program, put in M Life or Total Rewards or Identity Club, or even higher level strip versus downtown, or strip downtown local casino. However you want to do it, depending on how detailed you want. For payment, I delete everything except cash since I'm doing everything in cash. Next, we're going to set up category. And again, there's going to be defaults in there. I delete them all since I'm only using this for gambling. But again, if you want to keep some of them or all of them, go ahead. As I mentioned earlier, I use gambling as the main category. Just leave it open so that I can track other items in a budget if I need to. Next, we're going to set up subcategory. So I go into gambling. I set up the types of gambling that I do so I can track it. Slot machines, poker, video poker, blackjack. You can do that however you want. You could also, some people seem to want to track maybe the particular slot machine that they put money into. So you could make subcategories as detailed as you want them to be. Next thing you're going to want to do is set up the default and payment. And account type, you want to default to cash. Vendor, you might want to put in there your home casino. Category is going to default to gambling. Subcategory, again, you're more of a slot player. You might want to default it to slots. But again, it's easy to change it. It's pretty simple, but this just allows you to do a little quicker for the things that are more, that you do more often. So we're going to now add a budget. What you're going to want to do is I add a budget for every trip that I go on. So I put in a budget and you're going to enter a budget amount first. How much is your budget for this trip? Then a budget name. You're going to turn off repeat and you're going to put in specific dates. So I put in the dates of my trip and put the start date, end date. Now you have to watch because only transactions that you put in that fall within those dates will count towards this budget. So if you put in June 1st to June 5th and you're actually there June 6th and you put transactions in June 6th, they're not going to count towards the budget. What you do is use the plus and minus buttons at the bottom of the screen just to add an expense or an income. And what I do is anytime I give cash out, either put in a slot machine or to poker, blackjack, table, buy-in, whatever, I count that as expense. So if I put $20 in a slot machine, I do $20. If I put another 20, I do another 20. But every time I put cash in, I log it as expense. And then when I cash out and physically trade in my tickets for cash at the machine. I then do an income of what that was to get the cash back in. Same thing at blackjack. If I do a $200 buy-in at a table, I'll expense that as $200. Then when I actually cash out at the end of the session, I'll do an income, if appropriate, as to how much money I have now total. So if I cashed out at $250, I'd put in $250, and then of course the budget would show a positive $50 amount. So that's how I do it. That's why I switched to the paid version, which had more transactions, because I found if I was doing that 20 in a slot machine, I got a lot of individual transactions I entered, and I was hitting the maximum for how many you can have. There are a lot of reports that you can get, default reports that are set up by vendor, by payment type, by category, subcategory. You can see if you click on category and then click on that, you see the subcategory, the casino. You can also do custom reports. I'm not going to go through creating reports and all that to show that you can do reporting. So you can play around with that and see what kind of reports you want and see what kind of output you want to get. So that wraps up how I set up iXpenseit to use for a gambling budget. Again, you can probably use any budgeting app. I found this one to be, for whatever reason, when I found it a couple of years ago, it seemed to work. I used it. It's gotten better over time, actually. They made it a lot easier. The way the interface is now, it's pretty easy to just do the plus, enter the amount in, and you're done. There's also defaults that pop up. Frequently used entries to make it a lot easier to enter your entries. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments and I'll respond. If you like this video, please like it. Remember to subscribe for travel videos. Thanks.